I don't know what it's gonna take for so many of you to realize that fair use comes from our First Amendment rights. I've explained it in several videos. I've given you the Supreme Court precedents. And yet so many of you are still denying it. Why? Because you hate AI. And you're willing to go along with the forces that have been working for decades to take away our fair use, to take away our free speech. The MPA, the RIAA, the big content cartels like them. All the while claiming you're for the little guy, you're for the artist, you're for the independent guy just doing his own thing. You're not. You're going against them. So I don't know what it's going to take, but maybe there'll be one more way I can get this in. If Supreme Court precedent doesn't do it, if logic and reason doesn't do it, maybe seeing what scholars have been saying for decades will do it. And the thing about this is, this wasn't even hard to find. These were just like the first few in a DuckDuckGo search. You could easily find scholars all over the place confirming that fair use comes out of the First Amendment. Because it does. Because it would be stupid to deny it. Sorry, yes, you're stupid for denying it. If you're denying that fair use is part of our First Amendment protections, you're just stupid by this point. So maybe this will get it through to you. Won't listen to logic and reason? Won't listen to the Supreme Court? Why don't you listen to this article published in the August 1998 issue of Computers and Composition? There was a lot of discussion about this in 1998 because of the DMCA getting passed. The rights of free speech to search for truth, to strive for self-realization, and to participate in the processes of self-government are guaranteed in the First Amendment. But these rights would not be possible without the grant of public access to information provided by the doctrine of fair use in the Copyright Clause. It is of heightened importance that educators and other members of the public understand the interdependent nature of fair use and the First Amendment, and that the existence of fair use is necessary lifeblood to free speech. Yes, fair use comes straight out of our First Amendment rights, and we don't have our First Amendment rights without it. The First Amendment assures that we have a right to voice our ideas, assert conflicting views from which new thought is derived, and criticize thought and action of powerful forces in society. But fair use provides a means to access the information upon which our opinions are based. Without the fair use exception to copyright, free speech would be, at best, inhibited, and in some cases, eliminated altogether. Check that again. Free speech would be at best inhibited, and in some cases, eliminated altogether. And think about what I've been covering. Think about what I've been saying they want to do to us. They want to eliminate it forever. They've been trying to do it for well over 20 years with things like the DMCA. They're trying again because of AI, and you're falling for it. You're falling for it. I'm going to remind you again, as this article does, what actually the purpose of copyright is. The purpose of copyright is not to enrich artists. It's not to protect them against theft of their work. Oh, you're stealing my ideas. No. It says that the Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and the useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Of course, now limited is 70 years after the death of the author. That doesn't sound that limited to me. An author isn't even limited by his own death, let alone his death plus 70 years. That's ridiculous. That's a monopoly. That's not what this is supposed to be. And it's not about letting his progeny continue to enjoy that monopoly for another 7 years. It has nothing to do with that. It is to promote the progress of science and the useful arts. And note the phraseology of this. The Congress shall have power to promote the progress of science and the useful arts. That is the power being granted to Congress here. They are to promote the progress of science and useful arts, and the method by which they can do that is by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries, copyrights, and patents. Those aren't a power of the government. They're a means to an end. The power is to promote the progress of science and useful arts. Copyrights and patents are a tool by which they do that. But when copyrights and patents get to where they're going beyond merely promoting the progress of science and the useful arts, they then become unconstitutional. So, the fair use doctrine, a judicial creation later encoded in the statutory language of Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, provides specific support for the stated constitutional goals of the Copyright Clause. This doctrine has, since common law, supported the principle that access to information forms the basis for free speech and participatory government, and that without access to information, society's ability to progress would be hindered. It is significant that despite the frequent reference to the fair use defense as a privilege, this is what they keep saying, oh no, it's just a defense, it only matters when you go to court, and you only do it when you still get to take you to court, and then you have to defend it. No. It supports, instead, an exception to the limited monopoly of a copyright holder in support of a right of the public to access information, a far cry from the grant of a privilege. The right of public access is established in the policies behind both the First Amendment and the copyright statute. Fair use and the First Amendment are interdependent upon this point. And she quotes Patterson and Birch from 1996 saying, the relationship of the Copyright Clause to the First Amendment, in fact, is found in the free speech protections of the Copyright Clause. For it is the common origin of the First Amendment and the Copyright Clause that makes clear the purpose of the constitutional policies, to protect free speech rights by preventing copyright from being used as a device of censorship, consistent with the purpose that copyright promote learning. The limitations disenable Congress from granting a copyright that would effectively give recipients of the privilege plenary control of all learning in our society. And she even goes into the same Supreme Court cases like Harper and Row that I've covered. And there's a lot of explanations going all through this. I'll let you read that on your own, because I've got a few others to look at, but she still says some important things. Fair use is the precedential, and since the enactment of the 1976 Copyright Act, statutory representation, so before that, it was well-established Supreme Court precedent. Now, it's the law. They just codified the precedent of the policy of free speech and access to information that exists concurrently as the basis of the First Amendment. Without the fair use exemption to copyright liability, the guarantees of the First Amendment could not function. Yes, without fair use, the First Amendment could not function. Fair use and free expression are so interdependently entwined that it is surprising that the importance of fair use is so little acknowledged. With the advent of legislative moves to diminish the power of fair use and the tendency for courts to treat intellectual products as property, we should carefully consider the impact of a loss of fair use. And it's what we're facing right now. Fortunately, we've had a few good court decisions that have been protective of fair use. We need more of those. And in particular, we need these anti-AI cases to die the death. The importance of the right to free speech is clear to most Americans. Well, not so much anymore, sadly. But that of fair use is yet to be discovered by many. Because the value of fair use is not as well known, its existence is more vulnerable. But fair use is the lifeblood of the First Amendment. I think I should say that again. Fair use is the lifeblood of the First Amendment. There can be no complete understanding of copyright law without an understanding of its relationship to the First Amendment, arguably the single most important provision of the U.S. Constitution, particularly in light of the threats to public access that result from the backlash of the fear of the digitization of information. And remember, this is 98. This is back when they're talking about passing the DMCA. And there was a lot of opposition to that for this reason. That was an attack on free speech. That's why Judge Lewis Kaplan had to go against precedent and say the computer code was not free speech, so he could get those seminal DMCA cases through, the corrupt bastard that he is. And why the Ninth Circuit had to claw it back in several different cases thanks to Dan Bernstein. There is a heightened need to protect the fair use exemption. The interdependent nature of fair use and free speech, I'm going to emphasize that again, the interdependent nature of fair use and free speech makes strong fair use protections necessary to a healthy First Amendment. We must champion both. We must champion both. And she wasn't the only one here. We have Jeffrey P. Hull. I'm not really going to go over this. It's not that long anyway. All I need is like the title and the first paragraph. And this was back in 2009, January 1st, getting it in for the new year. Fair use prevents copyright from running afoul of the First Amendment. That's what I've been talking about before. When you got the copyright clause butting up against the First Amendment clause, what wins? The First Amendment wins. And fair use is how it does it. The Supreme Court has portrayed the concept of fair use as a way of preventing copyright protection from running afoul of the First Amendment's guarantees of freedom of speech and press. Just a quick look here at an overview of a journal article from Anthony Falzone of the Fair Use Project. The critical thing to remember about fair use is that it protects free speech rights. If copyright protection were absolute, and we didn't have the fair use exception, we couldn't really even talk about copyrighted material. That's what they've tried to do in the EU, isn't it? That's what they're in the process of doing. To the point where they want to make it where you can't even quote a bit of it. Hey, if so-and-so said in this book, well, copyright, you go get. It's crazy. We couldn't really even talk about copyrighted material. That is a huge concept when you think about it. Because that means that going against fair use gives you a fundamental contradiction that you cannot get out of. And there is no way out of that contradiction without supporting fair use and freedom of speech. And just one more little thing, a little infographic here from 2019 on copyright and fair use. And how we've got this little circle going on between free speech, copyright, and fair use. Free speech, the First Amendment guarantees important freedoms, including the freedom of speech, leads over to copyright. Copyright is a protection given to creators for a limited time to let them receive payment for their work. Actually, it's not, as we just saw, it's to promote the progress of science and the useful arts. It's an incentive for authors and creators to devote time and money to producing new works. In this way, copyright encourages speech and creativity. I think that's very debatable, but see, Stefan Kinsella is writing on that. Copyright necessitates fair use. Fair use is an important part of copyright that allows limited use of a copyrighted work without permission. That's an important thing. Because what they want to say is like, okay, yeah, you have fair use, but you still have to license it. No, a license is permission. The whole point of fair use is that you can use it without permission. Which means you can get it however you want. You download it from a pirate site. As long as your ultimate use is a fair use, that's it. For purposes such as commentary, criticism, parody, teaching, and works that are transformative. And remember how AI is highly transformative. Spectacularly so. The most transformative any of us will see in our lifetimes, thus saith the judge. Fair use promotes creativity and innovation and enables free speech. This is important. And now those of you who are going to continue on this anti-AI route, you are without excuse. You are not only against fair use, you are against freedom of speech. That's why you have to deny that fair use is a part of our free speech, because you don't want to admit that you're against free speech, but you are. You are. So now, you got a choice. You can either abandon your position and get behind fair use, or you can be yet another whiny little fascist who wants to destroy everyone else's right to free speech. Because there really is no in between here. Thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the comment god, shares for the show room. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell. And of course, as always, donate.bogosity.tv right here at the bottom of the screen. Please go there. Give whatever you can. Small amounts with cryptocurrency, larger amounts with PayPal, Venmo. I even have Cash App. I don't think I have a link up there, but let me know if you want to give me some in Cash App. I'll take it. I'll take it, whatever size, big or small. Or even better, if you want to become a regular supporter at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord, and get these videos early and ad-free, and other benefits as well. So please check those out. Thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, stay strong and be free.